last speaker in this segment of our program is Andrew Smigielski. And Andrew is one of the leading, and I mean leading, traffic engineers of this entire state. He is the owner of Southwest Traffic Engineering, and his company has completed projects and studies in just about every single municipality across the state, and is going to bring us a very, very unique perspective comparing maybe Tucson about how other areas have handled their transportation, how it's impacted economic development. He's going to talk to us about some trends. Tollways might come up, Hank, that you just brought up. And I have encouraged, if he chooses to get into this, I've encouraged and invited him to be critical of our area and how we've handled transportation, and we'll see if he touches on that. So he is the past president of the American Society of Civil Engineers and the also head of the Institute of Transportation of Engineers for the engineering, for the Arizona section rather, and he is also our third speaker.
Good morning, everyone. You're going to hear a little bit of a different look at things. There's a lot of exciting things that are going on in the region here, and it's neat to see that those projects that have been planned, paid for, that now they're coming to fruition, and they're going to have positive impacts in the area. But what I wanted to talk to you today about was some trends that we're seeing outside, all around Arizona, in the Southwest, and so forth. Some of the headwinds that we're facing, and some of the plans that have to be out there to address them. And first, Jim touched on one of them. I'm going to talk about trends. Miles driven. So I've only been working a little bit over 20 years, and I've seen a couple of the downturns. And every single time the downturns, we see vehicle miles traveled drop. People lose jobs, people drive less. Whatever happens, we see those numbers drop. And that's exactly what we've been seeing over since 2006. We saw traffic counters across the state of Arizona start dropping. People were driving less. Their jobs were disappearing, and that's where we kind of linked it to. But what was also linked to it was the millennials, that this group of kids that grew up with their parents driving them to sports events everywhere, them not having cars, a graduated driver's license in Arizona where it used to be you were 15 and a half and you could get your driver's license and woo, you're off. But that's not the case anymore. There are a lot of restrictions with that. And you've got Uber, you throw Uber into the mix, and oh yeah, we're driving less. But a funny thing happened. The economy started turning, apparently, 2 years ago, right? The economy started turning, and we started seeing our traffic counters that are set in stone start increasing across the entire state. Now, they're not jumping through the roof, and Jim had a good slide there that showed now they're starting to increase again, and we're seeing that consistently around Arizona on the interstates and city streets and so forth. So it's very interesting. And what happened during that time when everything started nosediving, the planners among us, and they started running amok. And they're like, oh, there's driving less. Nobody wants to drive. Everybody wants to bike. Even if you're in Phoenix and it's 115, you're going to bike. You're going to do all these things. And they started taking it, trends in my industry. A trend is something I look at that goes over 20 years, not that happens over 3 to 5. But they started coming up with this word, some of you may have heard about it, it's called complete streets. And the National Association of City Transportation Officials, NACTO, came out with a urban design guide, and they started calling these complete streets that we work with the development community. And the idea behind complete streets was, on my street, I have cars, buses, peds, bikes, all living together harmoniously, and no crashes, nothing. And there was absolutely no science, no engineering behind it. It was central planning at its best. And the reason I throw that out is I come from a family who kind of got away from communism, and central planning really doesn't work, I don't think. And so this guide came out there to go, hey, we want all of these users together. And maybe on some streets that really works, and I think it can, But on most streets, we have, hey, a big arterial road like Broadway or 22nd Street, it's meant to move people. I mean, the transportation industry, what we're trying to do is the safe and efficient movement of people and goods. That's what we're trying to do. And a lot of times, when you have different users together, it doesn't work. And safety-wise, even from a capacity level where you have a lot of people who are walking. Of course, when we're next to the university, we want more peds, bikes around. But as you start getting away from areas where you don't have those users, I'm not sure they mix. And every type of facility should serve a specific user. So then they came out with this. We had somebody who came out from Michigan and started the whole parkway and planted the seed of parkway, and it blossomed in Arizona. And these, in the last couple weeks, in the what they called the Michigan Parkway, now it's being called the Arizona Parkway, trying to get away from Michigan, I guess. That became planted in a lot of communities throughout Arizona. And interestingly enough, I'm working in 3 of them that over the past month I've been in meetings where these parkways, which are 200 feet of right-of-way, and imagine a 7-lane road, 200 feet of right-of-way, which is a lot. ADOT's freeway system is typically about 300 feet. And you would go through an intersection, you'd make the U-turn just like at Oracle and Ina and Grant, and then you'd come back and make a right. And it's supposed to be safer. It works really well in Michigan because of some unique characteristics that they have. But now all of a sudden, the same planners who thought this was a great idea in Arizona, we're starting to we're getting closer and closer to those becoming a reality. And people are really spooked about it. We have modeled things, and we have modeled those to see how they would work. They work. They work, and except what ends up happening as you have economic development that happens around those intersections, now instead of 1 bad intersection, you really have 3 bad intersections. And what's the kicker is it's 200 feet of right-of-way, and now the parkway system goes against what city officials are pushing with complete streets, because parkways are really not safe for pedestrians or bikes because of the tremendous space that you have. As a pedestrian, I have to cross 200 feet just to get from one corner to the other corner. It's very unsafe. Is it going to happen? We'll see. Nobody's built a true parkway in Arizona yet, and people are really skittish about it. Nobody has taken the lead on that to come out. There have been the spot improvements. There's been a little bit of success there, but ultimately, the spot improvements, they're spot improvements. We need big picture solutions across Arizona. Now, another item that we're seeing is megapolitans. You may have heard the word, and this is something that I do believe is happening. So the Sun Corridor in Arizona, Phoenix and Tucson, we are now considered a megapolitan. We are going against another one, Dallas, Fort Worth, Colorado Springs, Denver, San Jose, San Francisco, Sacramento, LA, San Diego, Seattle, Tacoma. All of these, and what's happening is these big regions now are beginning to coalesce around each other, and they're competing globally for economic development. We want the manufacturers, we want the businesses, we want these people who drive jobs. And so it's not anymore Phoenix versus Tucson, it's Phoenix and Tucson, the Sun Corridor, against Colorado Springs and Denver, against Dallas, Fort Worth. And that's what we have to start thinking about. Sure, we all want to win, just like Phoenix wants to beat Scottsdale, and here, Tucson wants to do better than Oro Valley. And that's fine, that competition is okay. However, we are now have to compete against these regions, and we have to work together. Even in the Phoenix area, you have Phoenix, Tempe, and Scottsdale form the Golden Triangle. You've got Sky Harbor right in the middle of it, and they are now on the same page. This is what we want. They each bring their unique aspects to what they can each offer, but they're on the same page, and they're doing it together. And what's happening is the agencies are working together. So even here, we need to have ADOT, we need to have Tucson, we have to have the county all work together, be on the same page, because that's what we're not competing against Sierra Vista, we're competing against somebody from the East Coast or in the Pacific Northwest. And that's been great, and we've been seeing those agencies work together here in Arizona. One of the best examples is in Prescott, Chino Valley, and Prescott Valley, if you've been up there. They have done a tremendous, ADOT, the county, and the cities and the town have all gotten together, and one of the best planning pushes I have seen in this state. They have laid out roads, corridors. This is where we want our highways to be. And now that it's all planned, one at a time, they're starting to pick them off because they want to compete. Because now that group is competing against Bullhead City, Havasu, and Kingman, which are also working together because right now in Bullhead City is a good example. SR 95. SR 95 is a north-south route if you've ever been to Laughlin and taking your chances on the river. It's one route that goes north-south, and it's been killing them. But they want to compete for retirees. It's decent weather, not in July where they fry the egg in oatmeal, but they want to compete against groups like Chino Valley, and they're planning it. They're planning bypasses, they're planning freeways, they're planning big parkways that, hey, it's easier for us to move around. And when businesses come in, I constantly hear from the developers I work with that, hey, people like to come to Arizona because in a lot of, like in the Phoenix region, it is easy for I can come in here, I'm gonna bring 1,000 employees. Got a great place to live in North Scottsdale. Oh, and by the way, I can move my employees easy to the workplace. They can get there whether it's biking or riding. And it doesn't take them half an hour to go across town to go to a meeting. And it's easy for them to move around. And that's a big deal. Let's see, some of the other things we're seeing. The truck regulations are changing. Right now, the ports along Los Angeles, Long Beach are some of the busiest in the world. And David and I, so we just saw a really good presentation, and where are you, David? Here and there. But from last week, and most of the goods, 30% of the goods they say that are shipped, that come in on the West Coast, move through Arizona. They go from LA and they kind of spread out in a pattern across the Southwest. And what's been interesting is the maps all just show LA and then they show Dallas, or they'll show Austin or Omaha. But what we're seeing, the truck regulations just came in, and now truckers have to wait they have 8 hours and they have to take a break, which puts Arizona right in the middle of that action. And if there's a way that this state can figure that out to go, whether it's inland ports, earlier it was Rod talked about the Deepwater port in Guaymas, one in Punta Colette, I think. Those are big deals. I was on a team, we were one of the shortlists for the Tesla project that came here. Now we lost to a town called Sparks. It's horrible. I mean, and then we also lost to a tremendous, big tax break. But one of the reasons the Tesla team liked where we were going was because we had the infrastructure. We had rail, we had access to the interstate, and then there are some other corridors that were being planned that will at some time happen. Moving on. So what does that all tell us? We're seeing that what we're starting to see is that infrastructure, because that's really my soapbox, infrastructure is when they ask people, it's ranked like 28th. Nobody really cares. I mean, everybody complains about potholes. Everybody complains about, oh, it takes a while. But when you ask folks, hey, where do you think infrastructure spending should be? Well, it's about 28th, behind a lot of other things. But what we're finding out is that infrastructure is driving economic development. And these folks, in September, the National Association of Manufacturers, so it's the manufacturers that came out with a big report. They were the first ones to fire the shot across the bow to go, look, in the 50 years when the interstate system was built, where there was a tremendous investment in infrastructure, moving people and goods across the country, they saw economic development, GDP, increase exponentially. And in the last 50 years, infrastructure spending has really been flat, especially in the last 10 years. The federal funding is starting to go away. The state and local funding is flat, and we're not seeing it. But there was a nice thing I saw in an article just yesterday. It's over the long term, competitiveness, output, and employment across industries would be enhanced largely due to the productivity effects of better infrastructure. That's kind of summarizing the report, and that's a big deal. But there are headwinds. We talked about lower federal spending. It's starting to go away. The National Highway Fund has now been extended, I think, 6 times. It expires in May. Most likely it'll be extended again. State taxes, we're pretty much flat. HERF rates. So the highway user revenue funds. Every time you go to the gas pump, 17 cents of that goes to the state. And then it's supposed to go to the roads, and then it gets divvied out by equations across the state based on population and so forth. Well, $1 billion of that has been rated over the last decade. $1 billion gone. And now they're seeing that those numbers drop because of some of the things that Jim talked about. More efficient cars. People have been driving less, but they're increasing now. But hey, I drive a diesel pickup, and I'm floored because I get 22 miles to the gallon. I'm pretty darn happy with that. And that's amazing. So you're seeing those revenues drop. The other things is there's no tax increases in Arizona. It's such a dirty word. I mean, we're just not going to even talk about that. Right after the election in November, Messrs. McConnell and Boehner threw out a plan. They did an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. This is our plan for the Republican Party. Didn't even mention infrastructure. Didn't even talk about it. So there's no real national push to that. So it's coming down to the states, and the states are having to grab that bull by the horns and go, hey, what's going on? And it's been fascinating to watch because there were several elections across the country regarding tax increases, and I think there was about 10 of them. 8 of them passed, 2 of them failed. 2 of them failed on because they're poorly written. But what do we do? What do we do now? So we know that we can't do spot improvements. We know that we have to have a transportation system that moves people. And yeah, okay, not everybody might not like a freeway or a parkway, but I still have to get from point A to point B, and I'm not going to be able to do it along a collector street, a smaller street. They have talked about vehicle miles traveled. You may have said there's a big test thing going on in Oregon where you have a little black box, however many miles you travel, you get a tax bill. That's been okay, but most likely that's going to go away. Public-private partnerships. We had somebody talk about a toll road maybe across town. And public-private partnerships, we have only, the laws had to be rewritten in Arizona. They were. There hasn't been, and what a public-private partnership, a P3, you might hear that word. You'll hear it's okay, me and Rod, we're gonna come in and we're gonna say, we're gonna finance this thing, we're gonna build this, you're gonna give us a toll, we're gonna get our money back and a little bit of profit, and then we'll turn it back to you. That's kind of how it works. There's only been one P3 project, and it's been an ADOT project to move an office in Flagstaff, right? So to move an office in Flagstaff, and I'm not sure how it's going, but there are limitations to P3. Toll road is not really welcomed out west. There is one outside Denver. You can go around from the airports, but they're limited. You can't do a P3 for everything. You can't do a P3 for 22nd Street or Grant. You just can't do that. So what it's coming down to is a tax increase. And regardless of where you stand on that, when you talk to the industry guys, the manufacturers, the AGC, the Association of General Contractors, they're saying the only way to do this is to do a tax increase. And I want to leave you with something here. And if we just agree, and I'm going off of Jim's graph. So if we agree, we drive about 15,000 miles a year, and we get about 20 miles a gallon. So you're paying about $130 a year to drive on the roads in Arizona. $130 a year. That's the Arizona tax, and that doesn't include the leaking underground storage tanks, Amy. But $130 a year. I bet you your cable bill is about $100 a month. And so even if we doubled that, I mean, it's still a drop in the bucket. But what we need is our industry it's difficult because ADOT can't go out there and go, we need this. They can say these are our fallbacks. And even last week we were in a presentation, ADOT finally put a dot on it. 2024, all of the HER funds will go to maintenance, no new projects. And everybody's wondering, when is it going to happen? 2024. In my span of planning, that is nothing. And there it was up on the screen, and everybody went, whoa. And even Rod's presentation had quite a few things. It's preservation, maintenance. This is what we're coming up against. And if we don't find another funding source, then it's going to hurt our state in a really big way. It's going to hurt our communities. The tax here is done in 2026. The tax in Maricopa County is done in 2022, I think. Those plans don't take forever, but what I'm asking you is just think about that, and when that call comes, we all depend on that development. We want folks to come to our communities, live, bring jobs, and the only way they're gonna do that is if their employees have a good place to live and they're able to commute, drive around, and move their goods and their folks. So, thank you. And I'll take questions, but I'm not gonna throw darts.
Just to show of hands, how many people knew that on average, we spend $130 a year for roads?
That's just the Arizona tax, right, Tim?
That's just the Arizona tax.
One person.
The federal tax.
Interesting fact.
The federal
Very
tax
interesting
the federal tax is 18 cents, so it's double that, $230. But Arizona is a donor state, so because of projects like the CAP that we're still paying back, I think we get 91 cents of every dollar we send to the feds, and so that extra 9 cents goes to the Big Dig in Boston or those kinds of projects, and we're a donor state. Texas is too, New Mexico, California, all donor states.
Can you comment on the I-10 corridor between Tucson and Phoenix and what's likely to happen to that? Is that ever going to get fixed?
It's getting fixed. I think ADOT's been doing a really good job of widening it. One of the challenges they have is the tribe is in the middle, and there are some issues about some right-of-way things, and it's the tribe that's going to hold it up. Right now, ADOT had 4 public meetings in the last week for the north-south corridor, which is another freeway corridor that will connect US 60 near Apache Junction and go up to about I-10 and Eloy. Those are in the planning stages right now, but you can take a look at that. But the only thing that's holding up I-10 is really, it's the tribe. There's whatever those negotiations, and I've heard rumors about what's happening, they're not giving up the right of way.
We talked about, and Andrew's talked about various challenges we have with funding. Those 2 projects are outside of Maricopa County and outside of PAC. Therefore, they're in this, what we call the statewide region. So because of the funding mechanisms that the state has and how those funds are distributed based on, I guess I'll say, the Casa Grande Accords that were 10 years ago, there's equations for how that funding is. A certain percentage goes to MAG, a certain percentage goes to PAC, and the rest goes to the rest of the state. So since those 2 projects are outside of those 2 areas, the funding is very limited. That's why when you looked at the presentation I showed, you saw very few green or E expansion projects outside of PAG. You didn't see MAG because I don't look for MAG. Outside of PAG. And once you get outside of Pima County, you'll see very few expansion projects. So it's a combination of funding challenges, they're very expensive projects, and also what Andrew was talking about, what I like to call the heavy political lifting with the Indian community and the Gila River Indian community, and how we deal with the issue of frontage roads and access and controlled access on the interstate and maintenance and all of those issues. So I expect to see the I-8 one done first because it's outside of those issues. The last one is going to be real challenging.
So what are your comments just on the future of this I-11?
I think it's a step in the right direction. We come back to globally. The idea is that Long Beach, if you ever go to the Long Beach or LA ports, bring a gas mask and something to cover your eyes because thousands of trucks go there and they wait for those cargo ships to unload. Yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, they said that some of the ships now are waiting 8 days to unload, which is, holy cow, 8 days just sitting out there. And all that freight, it's a monster opportunity. You put in, I mean, there's a lot of security issues about how do you seal these things, but with RFIDs, could you have a deep water port, picks up these containers, puts them on a train, ships them into the Sun Corridor, you have a bunch of jobs, they unload them, they get shipped out throughout the United States, and that's, now all of a sudden we have inland ports, and we've heard that word. But I-11 is a good thing. We don't have that north-south route, and for us to connect, it's not just for Phoenix to go to Vegas, which I like, but it's also to go from Mexico through Phoenix up to Canada. That's the idea. And if we can establish those corridors, it comes down. Can we move those goods? And if we can, with the trucking regulations that are out there, why can't we have some of those jobs? Why can't we put manufacturing businesses back on the map in Arizona? And we are. It's happening, but it's happening slowly. And the only thing that's going to, one of the biggest things that's going to help is the infrastructure. Do we have the rail lines? Do we have the roads? Do we have roads that aren't full of potholes? Can the trucks go without breaking their axles and those kinds of things? I think it's great. And the I-11 corridor, if you've driven 93, that's the I-11 corridor in Arizona. So it's already been built to interstate standards. There is actually a new sign, which is pretty neat. I took a picture of it. It says future I-11 corridor. But it's still going to be a while. They're working on that.